Oh my goodness, we are back again after a few weeks of hiatus because of my travels. Welcome, and I'm glad to see you here today. We're going to have an interesting conversation, an interesting guest. A lot of us hear about and talk about things like wills and estate planning and guardianship and power of attorney, and it all becomes legalese. And it actually sounds a little bit, I don't know, if not overwhelming, at least sometimes it becomes eye rolling. We say, I don't even know where to start. And it's another one of those things like life insurance that we hear so much that we need to have certain things in place. We don't even know what we're supposed to be doing or how to go about doing it. So we're going to try to simplify and demystify and just make it more conversational today with our special guest. So I'm just going to invite you to put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation today because it's time once again for Coffee Breaks with Steve. Welcome on this Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. If you are joining us live, I'm glad you are here. Please make sure that you say hello in the chat, as a number of you have done already. If you're watching on Facebook, I know that we can see those. I'm not always sure about YouTube. I know some people tune in via YouTube, but I'm not always positive that I'm seeing all the chat comments as they come up here. So I apologize if I do miss you there. If you are, no matter where you're tuning, just want to remind you that even if you're on Facebook, Facebook is really still the best place to tune in live to Coffee Breaks with Steve, although you can get it live on YouTube as well. But we're doing a lot more and preparing to do even more with YouTube. And so I would just invite you, if you haven't already done so, if you are on Facebook right now, wait till after the show to do this, but go over to YouTube, find the Coffee Breaks with Steve channel and subscribe and like the videos. And that actually helps with the algorithm. It means more people are going to see and hear about Coffee Breaks with Steve and join us and be involved in these great topics and meet these wonderful guests. If you're already on YouTube right now and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so and like the video. Yes, I'd say hello to a few people. Jerry Thompson, good morning. And Kathy McCormick, good morning. Carissa is here. Good morning, Carissa. Kathy Garlick, good morning. You didn't say good morning, Kathy. And Carla Venturi, good morning. If you are tuning in and you haven't yet said hello in the chat, please do so. And when we get into our topic today, please do make your comments and ask your questions. All right, listen, I was traveling for a couple of weeks there. I think I mentioned beforehand and may have posted a few things online during, but my wife Carol right now is doing consulting work and has a contract with a hospital organization in Providence, Rhode Island. And the work that she's doing, she is working from home from here for a month at a time and in Providence for a month at a time. And so when she's in Providence, I'm not necessarily going to be there for the entire month that she's there, but I'm typically going to be joining her for the middle section of those trips so that we only have a little bit on each side of her trips away. I was going to say abroad. Rhode Island's not quite abroad. Feels like it. I mean, it is literally on the other side of the country from here, but that way, at least our time away from each other is somewhat limited. And we get to do fun things on the weekends while we're there. While we were there last time, we actually took one Saturday and went up and toured Salem, Massachusetts, which you may know is famous for the witch trials, among other things. And for us, it's less about fascination with witches. It's because Carol's ancestry includes, as she's done her ancestry research, includes at least one person who was accused of witchcraft during those trials, and another person in her direct line who was one of the key accusers of witches. And so it was interesting to go and check out some of the history museums and that type of thing while we were there. It is fascinating. It is a fascinating place to be, and it's something I'm glad that we did. But we've got some other plans for our upcoming trips back there. And oh, cool, Jerry Zetterval. Hello, Jerry, by the way. Watching on YouTube first time. I'll be curious to get feedback from you afterwards, Jerry, about how that experience is. Obviously, I can see your comments in the chat, so that's good. And Kim Baker's on here. Good meowing afternoon and happy Catterday. Good, same to you. Providence, were you doing that as if it was a cat talking, Kim? That's what it looked like. What are your thoughts? I haven't tried that yet. Download Facebook every week. LOL. Okay, good. All right, listen, we've got a lot to cover today, so I want to get to our sweet and savory segment here so that we can get on to our conversation with our guest. Sweet and savory, it's something that we changed a few weeks ago. It's a new segment that we've added to Coffee Breaks with Steve that still covers a lot of the same things that we've talked about in the past when we shared special days, etc. This is less focused on, oh boy, if I can't talk, I can't. Thank you. It's less focused on a bunch of special holidays and more focused on updates and interesting things that are going on, but always interested in hearing what you have going on as well. So just a little bit to share with you. First of all, if you weren't already aware of it, we are now in the first full day of autumn today. It actually occurred kind of overnight on the West Coast here. It was just a few minutes before midnight that we officially transitioned into autumn. And if you were anywhere in any other time zone, it was after midnight and probably happened while you were asleep. But this is the first full day of autumn. We are now out of the summer months and into the autumn months. So welcome fall, right? So we've already been getting some of that kind of transition weather. Did you know that starting next week, starting on Monday, the government is again providing free home tests for COVID-19? I think the concern is as the fall months come and we're more susceptible, the vaccines, the boosters are coming back, but you can now go on it. And I don't have the exact website here, but you can go and do a Google search and it will direct you to that. And starting Monday, you can get 4 free home tests again. I don't know how long that will last, but be aware of that is available. Do you remember about a couple of months ago, we had a guest on the show by the name of Sid Niemeyer, who is an author writing his first book. He just wrote his very first book called Atomic Peril. And he was talking about preparations for the publication and release of that book. Well, it is about to come out, and I wanted to share something with you here. And let's see if it's going to let me share this. I want to share a quick screen share of Sid opening his proof copy, and see if this is going to come up here. It may or may not let me do this. But let's see, sharing this tab to StreamYard. That's nice. Do I see it on here? Don't know that I see it. I wanted to share a video of him actually opening the proof copy, and I'm not sure that it's letting me pull that up right now. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'll share it and post it on my Facebook page later on if it's not going to let me do this. And I'm just looking to see if it's letting me pull it up here. Oh, yeah, it is. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share this. Let's see if this happens. Maybe. Let's try it over here. Here we go. Technology.
I think I know what this is. Yes! I can't believe it. First time holding the real thing.
All right. Gonna go ahead and stop that now here as it continues to repeat in my ears. Just want to let you know that Sid's book is going to be available on October 4th on Amazon.com. And I know I'm ready to order a copy of this, and just want to encourage you. You can actually go on Facebook, here on Facebook, and do a search for Sidney Niemeyer, author. That was the page that I just had the video feed from. And on Sidney Niemeyer, and again, you can see on the cover of the book there, the spelling of Niemeyer. Sidney Niemeyer, author on Facebook will lead you to his relatively new Facebook page for the book. And you can keep track of that and look on Amazon.com for when Atomic Peril is going to be available for order to the public. A couple of birthdays I wanted to mention this week, and one is happening tomorrow. Ron Sparks. Ron Sparks is my uncle, Uncle Ron, and there's a picture of him with my Aunt Karen. And Ron is celebrating a birthday tomorrow, so happy birthday, Ron, Uncle Ron. And then on the 27th, maybe, here we go. Got to click in the right place. Goodness gracious, I need more coffee today for sure. Julene Groh, dear friend, is celebrating a birthday on the 27th. So happy birthday to Julene. And just a reminder that if you have a special day coming up this week, please put it in the chat so that we can celebrate with you. If you have something coming up by the end of this month, actually, if you don't do it, if it's this week, you're going to put it in the chat. If it's not this week, we're probably into October or very close to it. Then let us know what you got coming up in the month of October, even November if you want. And we'll make sure that we include celebrating with you in the appropriate episode of Coffee Breaks with Steve. If you have something else that you think we should be sharing as part of Sweet and Savory, an interesting news story, an item of interest, or maybe it's an update of your own, especially if you have been a regular part of Coffee Breaks with Steve, maybe you have something going on that you think would be interesting for us to share in our Sweet and Savory segment, then please let us know about that so that we can do that. All right, I'm just going to make sure that I'm not missing anybody else here that joined. Rick Venturi, good morning. If I haven't said good morning to you yet, say something here in the chat so that I see that you're here. And again, I apologize if I missed you. I'm looking two things at once here. But Anyway, I want to let you know a little bit about our guest this week and our topic. And I'm just going to let you know ahead of time. This was a recorded conversation that we did a couple of weeks ago. And the version that you're going to see is edited down for time. And we get into these conversations, as you know from past experience. Sometimes we just really get going, and it takes a while. And so this one is edited down for time, but after the episode airs, I'm going to be putting the full version with the unedited portion, which includes some extra questions and comments on YouTube. And so I'll be letting you know on my Facebook page when that happens. But I want to let you know about our guest. Kristina Mattson is an estate planning and elder law attorney based in Spokane, Washington. Her focus is on estate planning, probate, adult guardianships, and Medicaid planning. Ms. Mattson has lived in Spokane for 16 years and focuses on personal service and helping clients address legal issues as comprehensively and efficiently as possible. Prior to entering this field, Kristina Mattson represented business clients in the areas of environmental law and commercial litigation. She's a graduate of the University of Colorado School of Law and Macalester College, and she is a member of the Washington Association of Elder Law Attorneys. So just as a reminder, even though this is a recorded conversation, you can put your comments and your questions for Kristina in the chat. If she is able to tune in and join us today, she might answer those immediately. If not, she'll have access to the recorded version of our episode today, and she can get back to you and respond in the chat to the questions and comments that you may make right now. So now, here is my conversation with Kristina Mattson. Well, Kristina Mattson, welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you for joining us today. And I just always find it interesting to talk to people who have a professional specialty in an area like yours, and particularly in this area of estate planning, because it seems like such a broad and sometimes I think for people an esoteric concept. So can you just maybe briefly talk about what it really is an estate plan and why everyone should look into having one?
In its most simplest form, I think an estate plan is really just a set of instructions that you are giving your loved ones or people that you trust to handle your affairs when you pass.
You know, when you talk about estate plan, the first thing that comes to a lot of people's minds is, a will. And a will is an important part of that. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I also want to dispel a common myth, and that is that if you have a will, you avoid probate after your death. And that's not correct, is it?
That's correct. That a will does not avoid probate. So really what probate is about is the nature of the assets in your estate. And so the law defines or characterizes assets as either probate assets or non-probate assets. And the most typical probate asset is real estate. And so if the deed to your home or to other property that you own, when you pass, still has your name on it, it will most likely be a probate asset. And so if you have a will that says at my death, everything I own to my spouse and then to my children, and after we've both passed everything to my children, there's going to need to be some sort of action taken to get that asset to the beneficiaries. And so that most typically is probate, although for smaller estates, there are alternatives to probate, and also other really great legal tools that can avoid probate. The other point is that the most typical non-probate assets are assets that are held in a bank or in other financial institutions, such as retirement plan or stocks. If you have submitted a payable on death beneficiary form at those institutions that say, at my death, the assets in this account to go to these persons or this charity, this entity, then it's treated as just a contract that, okay, when the person passes, we will cut a check to these identified beneficiaries, and there's no need for probate to have a court-appointed executor, or the new term is personal representative, to gather those assets, pay debts, and make distributions. And so my end point there is that the will doesn't take you to the goal line, but it can in contribution with other things.
And it is directive. I mean, it at least expresses what your intent is, and then that gives some direction or means for the probate court to be able to help define those. So let's talk a little bit about trusts.
Yes.
And I mean, I think sometimes we say, well, it differs from a will, but there is an inclusiveness in that the trust is somewhat different in terms of what it encompasses and what it includes. And I'd just like you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to. So there are different kinds of trusts. And so essentially, so a trust is a document that you can think of as like a basket that holds all the assets that are in it. And that when a person passes, the instructions in that trust control how the assets are distributed. And so a common trust would be a living revocable trust, where the person who established it is often the trustee. And then when they pass, they name someone else to be the trustee. And then the person sets out their instructions about how they want their assets to be distributed when they pass in the trust. But there can be other instructions like taking advantage of estate tax exemptions at the federal and state level, and marital trust exemptions, and then also managing assets that might go to a minor beneficiary, so that those assets could be held in trust until they reach a certain age or over a certain course of ages. And then also there can be supplemental needs or special needs trust built into a trust or in a separate trust. So there's very, very different types of trusts, right? And there can also be trusts that are like a Medicaid compliant trust, an irrevocable trust, where once the assets are in there, they can't be removed by the beneficiary. And so the key to a trust, and what a lot of people do get a living revocable trust, where you can put assets in and out during the course of your lifetime, is that the hope is to avoid probate. And so those assets that are in the trust, when a person passes, will be handled privately by the trustee. So the trustee can sign the deed over from the trust to, if there's a real property in the estate, to the beneficiary. A pitfall with trust that I find for a lot of folks is that a trust is only as good as what's in it. And so if a person didn't, direct that a financial account go to the trust at their passing, or didn't title real estate in the name of the trust, then that asset has to be handled in probate, most likely. Yeah. And so it doesn't necessarily avoid probate. And so for that reason, like anything, an estate plan has to be tailored to the person, right? Or the couple that's doing it. And not every plan works well for every person. And so not every person or couple need a trust, and not everybody needs a will. If you do have a trust, you also need a will. It's just how it works, so that when you pass, everyone understands that, okay, everything I want it to be distributed according to the instructions in the trust. It's called a pour over will. But it's just a collection of things that just depend on who you are.
There can also be elements that deal with medical care, and also decisions that might need to be made in the event that a medical situation becomes terminal, or where you're no longer able to make decisions for yourself. How is that? What are those elements, and how are they incorporated into a living trust?
Okay, so I think what you're thinking of is a separate set of documents. Okay. And these are called power of attorney documents. And so power of attorney documents are not part of a trust or a will. They're completely separate, and they're only effective while we're alive. And so, for example, I draft durable power of attorney documents for health, and a general durable power of attorney document, which it generally certainly encompasses finances, but more than that. I often joke that it's everything but the kitchen sink. And those documents are where you identify a person. Usually I advise that people have a primary agent and then a successor who can act on your behalf if you're unable to, right? So get to that, what you were just saying. If you are in a car accident, or you're terminally ill, and you need someone who can speak with your care providers, who can receive your medical information, who can make decisions about where you receive care, who provides care, all of those very, very important questions. That is legally set out in a power of attorney document. And there are different types, but the most common these days are durable power of attorney documents, which mean that it's a very powerful document. It means that the document is effective upon signing, and it's durable through periods of incapacity without having to get a doctor's note saying that the principal, the person who signed it, no longer has capacity. And the reason for the change in the law and the change in the practice, because it used to require that, it used to be called springing power of attorney documents, is because just practicalities necessitate that when your loved one is in a car accident and you're rushing to the hospital, you need to be able to get access immediately, to talk with the care providers, to get the medical information. And so that durable power of attorney document for health allows you to do that. And similarly, the durable power of attorney, general durable power of attorney, or durable power of attorney for finances allows you to get to the bank, right? To make sure that the bills are paid, that the mortgage is paid, the utilities are paid. And so I often tell my clients that those documents are, in my view, the most important estate planning documents that you can sign. And if you are really trying to budget your estate planning dollars, I would prioritize those over the will or the trust. And the other one that you might have been referring to that I do is it's advanced healthcare directive. So that's for end of life. If you are in a permanently unconscious state as determined by two treating physicians, or you've been diagnosed as terminal and not expected to revive, how would you like your care providers to handle CPR and assisted ventilation, where it's only going to prolong the process of your dying? That is sometimes called a living will, and so it gets confusing. So in any event, I refer to it as an advanced healthcare directive. But those three documents are the ones, the durable power of attorney documents for health and finances. And that one, I think, are really, really important to your estate plan.
I think there's sometimes a misconception that estate planning and some of the elements that we're talking about only apply to older people. What are some of the reasons why a younger individual or couple might want to consider some form of estate planning or planning for unforeseen events?
Right. Well, I think that the durable power of attorney documents are essential for anyone over age 18 because of the reasons that I just stated, right? We can never foresee if we're going to be in a car accident or something. And so I've even just in the last few weeks, as kids have been getting ready to go to college, have drafted some power of attorney documents where they've named their parents with joint independent authority to act on their behalf if anything were to happen, right? And of course, we never know, and it generally doesn't happen to young people, but it's just a safeguard, right, that it's in place. So that would be my number one for young people. And then I understand why there isn't as much of a need to have a will or a trust, certainly if you don't really have any assets. And so my advice for young people, especially if you're not married yet or you don't have children, is to just look at your assets. And so if you have a bank account, right, and that really is your primary asset, you just want to make sure that you've completed those payable on death beneficiary forms with the bank that says, at my death, any of the assets in this account to go to X person or persons, right? Yeah. And then, and the reason I say that is because in Washington State and in other states, we have a set of laws called the intestacy laws, and they're really gap fillers. So if you don't have a will, right, if you don't have instructions saying, at my death, my assets go to these people, then the intestacy laws apply, right? What they say is everything to your next of kin, essentially, right? So Washington is a community property state. So if you are married, then your spouse gets 100% of the community property, and the separate property, the spouse gets half and your children get the other half. If you're single, right, let's say that you're a college kid or you're just 18, then then your estate would go to your parents, right? And so it just, the law sets out who's to receive. And then as let's say that you have a partner and you have children, then the concerns become caring for those children if you were both to pass, right?
Yeah.
And so setting out in a will or a trust who the guardian would be for your children, who the trustee would be of the assets. And this is the most common time that I would recommend a trust for regular folks, is just, and I have minor children. And so in the event my husband and I were both to pass, then the trust sets out who the guardians would be for the kids. And we've actually named the guardian the same as the trustee, because then they'll have access to the assets.
Yes.
Without having to go through the time and expense of probate. They'll immediately have the authority to care for the children, at least by the parents, and then the assets to care for them. And so that's my number one reason for advising an estate plan for young families.
When a person has gone through the process of putting together any of these legal documents, do you have any suggestions or recommendations? Number one, about safely storing the documents that they have, so that they're both accessible but also safe, as well as sharing them. Who else besides the principal, people who are having these documents produced should have copies of or access to the legal documents?
Right. It's a good question. I do give the originals to my clients for them to maintain. And in Washington State, if you're going to file a probate, the court needs to have the original will with the wet signatures filed with the court. And so it's very important to hold on to that original will, as well as the trust document. The trustee down the road is going to need to have that original trust document. And so, it's up to each individual person, right? If they've got a safe at their home, if they have a safe deposit box, you can, if you plan on staying in the county, you think that you'll pass in the county where you live, you can deposit that will with the court, and can be held there until you pass. I've had a couple clients that we've done that with. It's not the end of the world, right? Everything can be fixed to some degree. So I've had plenty of cases where they couldn't locate the original will for the probate, but we had a copy and we had no evidence that it had been revoked, or we've been able to contact the attorney that drafted it and get an affidavit from them saying that this looks like a true and correct copy, and that the personal representative can say the same. And so copies are accepted for probate, but it certainly is preferable and in compliant with the law, and easier if you've kept it safe. Regarding copies and disseminating copies, I would say that you certainly want to provide copies to the people that you've identified as your fiduciary agents, right? Mm-hmm. So in a power of attorney document, if you've listed a person as your attorney in fact or as your healthcare agent, they should have a copy. And the importance of power of attorney documents is copies under the law are as effective as originals. So I always advise my clients, keep the originals in a safe place and you use the copies around town. Mm-hmm. And then I even will scan, if the clients request, and they most often do, I'll scan and email copies to them so they have it electronically if they need it in a hurry, or if they want to forward it to their relatives. Regarding beyond that, right, beyond the agents that you've listed as either your attorney in fact or your personal representative, which is the new term for executor, then I don't think there's a need to share wills and trusts with beneficiaries, especially, and it really depends on the family dynamic, right?
Right.
If you've got folks that, if there's going to be a surprise or people are going to be hurt or people just don't get along, there's no need to fuel that fire, right? And so, certainly once a person passes and if a probate is established or the trustee is beginning to work on making distributions from the trust, every beneficiary named in those estate planning documents is entitled to see a copy. And so I always, if I'm the attorney for that fiduciary, I always say yes, right? Information is power. People, I mean, it's just, we all do better when we understand and we feel that we're in the loop and we're communicating openly. And so if I've got a beneficiary who's asked me for a copy of the will or a copy of the trust, I will send it to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll just do it preemptively just so that it helps people to understand and we have less questions, which is ultimately
Right.
less costly to the estate. And then with power of attorney documents, it's very similar. So I often have clients who say, I just want to hold those close, right? And I want to give those out if somebody asks for it. And my view is, why not, right? If you're trying to help mom sign into an assisted living facility, and they said, well, how do you have authority to do this? Then you provide them a copy of the durable power of attorney, right?
Right.
Or if you're, working with their investment accounts, wanting to make sure that they're in keeping with their estate plan or whatever it may be, and that company asks for it, yes, provide a copy. So I guess it just depends on the document and where you are in a person's situation.
Is it important to periodically review and potentially look at updating these legal documents? And if so, why?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of really trying to get the most for your money, right? Like I keep saying, these are practical documents. You've spent a lot of money to get them done right. And I'd really try to make them last as long as possible, right? And so, for example, there's sometimes, like if we look at any of these, be it the will and trust or the durable power of attorney, things may change as we age, right? So when you're younger, it's likely going to be your spouse and then maybe a sibling that'll serve as your agents. But then as you age, it might become your children, right? And so if I've got families that come to me or a person who comes to me whose kids are just on the cusp of adulthood, right? We can say, okay, my agent is my sibling, but then when my child reaches the age of 30, they move into this role, right? They become the primary attorney in fact, or they become the personal representative. And so there's ways to build in longevity to the documents, right? Another way that I do it is if you have a close relationship with, let's say your children, let's say I have 2 children, you can say, I appoint, these 2 people with joint and independent authority to act on my behalf, because you know that they're going to work together and that in a practical format, if so-and-so, one of the kids lives in another state, right?
Right.
The other kid's with you at the bank.
Yeah.
You don't need both to sign, but you know that you're in agreement. That also adds flexibility and longevity, right? If one were to pass away or we're not unable to serve, you still got the other. That's why I always ask for successors as well. Other reasons, I definitely don't advise, every 5 years or something. It's really more fluid than that. And it depends on where you are in your life, right? So if you have moved from another state and you expect to be in the new state long term, then that would be a reason, I think, to revisit your estate planning documents, especially just to be apprised of what the law is in the state where you currently live. Right. So, for example, Washington is a community property state, but we're only one of 9 states in the country that are community property states. Washington has, right, an estate tax after 2.193 million, but other states don't have any estate tax. So it just depends on where you live in terms of how you're going to craft your estate plan. And then, of course, if a spouse were to pass, right, children age, all of those things where you don't need the guard provisions anymore, or you actually start to divest from your assets, right, where you may not even own a home anymore, right? Yep. And so there's just reasons where you may need change, and it doesn't hurt to talk to an attorney, right? Most of us, free consultations on the phone, and I always say information is power. And so if someone can just talk with you briefly about, hey, well, in light of this, that, and the other, I think the best route for you right now is just to transfer on death deed, call it good, right? Or your plan seems to deviate from the intestacy statute, so I think you will need a will, right? Whatever it may be, it's worth talking and then making a decision from there. And there certainly are times where I've had folks come in and ask me to look at their documents, and I say, you know what, I think this is still in keeping with your current estate plan, and there isn't a need to change them.
Mm-hmm. So let's just to follow up on this idea of information, etc. Can you talk just briefly about what people should be doing to properly research legal advice and an attorney? What to look for, and how to go about vetting to find the right attorney for their needs, and someone who's really going to be viable for what an individual or family might require?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think you have to treat finding an attorney, an estate planning attorney, like you would really any other professional, right? That you ask around, you ask your friends, who do you use? Did you like them? Were they, reasonable price-wise? Did you have a good feel? Did you trust that they knew what they were doing? And, make a few calls, because I personally can just decide when I'm on a phone call with somebody if I have a good feel for them, right? Just use our intuition or whatever to just see, do I like working with this person? Are they listening to me, right? Do they seem like they're going to be thoughtful about this plan? And then, like I said, you can make a few calls, right? The rules of professional conduct for attorneys is if you aren't able to take a case, right? If for some reason you're too busy or it's not the right fit, you don't have to give any names, but if you decide to give a couple names, you have to give at least two. Mm-hmm. So, I'm certainly, if folks ask me, if they ask me, hey, do you have some other folks that you would recommend? I'm happy to do that, right? Not everybody is, but that might be a good marker for, okay, do I want to work with this person? And I think because it is important, right? I wouldn't just call the first person and maybe you didn't have a good feel with them, but you still stuck with them. I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah. Would put in the time to make a few calls. I have received some new clients from just folks Googling, estate planning or elder law attorneys in Spokane. I have received some from going through associations like the Washington Association of Elder Law Attorneys, or the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys, or AVO, or the Washington State Bar, or the Spokane County Bar Association. Those can be helpful, right? But honestly, most of the clients that I have came from referrals from other clients or people or other attorneys. And so it's like everything else. I think you really just have to get a good feeling about the person. Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that we haven't already covered that I haven't prompted you or asked you about that you feel would be important for people to understand or consider in estate planning? Any kind of last thoughts about that?
I really think, and I've talked about it a couple of times, so I'm maybe a little embarrassed. I'm just really, really pushing it here, is I do, like I said, really think that the power of attorney documents are the most important document you can get done. I can tell you from personal experience, when my mom, she had advanced dementia, and when the rubber hit the road, I needed those documents to be able to help her. I got to the point, I think I had to show them daily for a few weeks until we got her the right care. It was at the point where I kept those documents in my car. And so the reason that this is so important, especially as people age, is that if a person hasn't signed power of attorney documents and they become ill, be it through dementia or whatever may be ailing them, and they get to a point where they're not able to understand and sign power of attorney documents, then there isn't, the only option left is court-appointed guardianship and conservatorship. Yeah. So power of attorney documents are considered a contract under the law. And so a person really does have to have the mental capacity to understand and sign them. They don't have to physically be able to sign them, but they have to, the attorney working with them in their professional opinion has to be assured that the person understands what they're doing and their agent and why, et cetera. And so I've seen it time and time again where people have just waited too long, and their parents or their loved one or their neighbor is no longer able to identify their agent. And so then the case has to go to, or the person's care has to be monitored by a court-appointed guardian. And that can be avoided with these documents. So that's my soapbox, Steve.
I think it's a good one. So just from a personal standpoint, for people who may have additional questions, where are you licensed? And if someone is in your area and is interested in learning more about how they can put together their estate plan, or just have more questions, how can they contact you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I am licensed in Washington State, and you do need to work with an attorney that's licensed in the state where you reside to do these types of documents. I'm based in Spokane. I just have an office just north of downtown on Boone and Lincoln. And I can be reached. You can go, I have a website, so you can just Google my name and it should come up. And then you could call or email me. I'm not sure if it helps for me to give that over the podcast. I'm happy to. Will folks be able to?
You can do that. I'll make sure that information is posted and available for anybody who may want to have that. But you're welcome to share that if you'd like to.
Yeah. So my email is Kristina. So just Kristina at kmattsonlaw.com. And my office number is 509-998-6629.
And again, that'll be posted. And if you are in the state of Washington and you would like to follow up with Kristina, I just encourage you to do so. Kristina Mattson, estate planning, probate, and elder law attorney. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you so much for sharing so many points and so much of what I think is just vital information for people.
Thanks so much for having me here today. I've really enjoyed it.
That was Kristina Mattson. And I hope you found some of the information that she shared useful, informative, and interesting. I know maybe I'm weird, but I find learning about these kinds of things to be really intriguing and interesting. And I will let you know that when Carol and I moved from California to Washington about 1.5 years ago, we already had a trust in place. We already had the advanced directive, power of attorney, and those various documents in place that we had taken care of in California. But we wanted to make sure that we were up to date, both in terms of having moved to Washington and just in general, because things change over time. And so we went through a vetting process and got some recommendations, and actually did have Kristina Mattson work with us to update our trust documents and our power of attorney and advanced directive documents, all of that. And so that's both just to let you know that I didn't just find this person and ask her to come on here. I've worked with her, but it's also just to let you know that I do have a working relationship with Kristina. I want to let you know about some things that are coming up just in the last couple of minutes that we have. What are we doing in the next few weeks? Well, I'm pretty excited about all of these that are coming up. First of all, you know who Kim Baker is. She's on here. She is a regular participant and a member of our Coffee Breaks family. Well, Kristina is actually going to join me next week as co-host on the air, and we're going to be talking about something called synesthesia. And if you don't know what synesthesia is, it's when your brain routes sensory information through multiple unrelated senses so that you experience more than one sense simultaneously. For instance, some people, when they listen to music, they actually see colors or they see images. There are a variety. There are several different manifestations of synesthesia, and we're going to talk about those next week because Kim Baker actually manifests several and has done a lot of research on it, has a lot of information, and she's just a fun person. So I know you're going to enjoy that. Please tune in next week. And I know some of you on here either know that you have synesthesia, or you may discover some things as we have this conversation next week. The week after that, Christopher Gerbes is going to be on. Christopher is a certified financial planner. It's another one like today where you're going to go, really, do I want to hear some guy talking about money? He's going to talk about some practical things that people at all stages of life need to know about in terms of where their money is, where it's invested. That's become more and more important as we think about some of the things that go on with our economy and with our personal finances. And it goes beyond just saying you need to have a budget. We're going to talk about some really practical things. And Chris is another really cool guy that I think you'll enjoy meeting and listening to. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to have, do you remember a while back, about a year ago, we had a guest on the show who was a YouTuber who reacts to music videos. Well, this is another one, similar but different. Lolly Wren is on YouTube under the moniker of the Fairy Voice Mother. She is absolutely hilarious to watch and creative. She's very quirky, and I don't mean that in a negative way, very personable, and her reaction videos are a masterclass in music. I don't want to go into it too much because you just want to be here and meet Lolly as well. She is actually based in London, England, and so this is going to be another one of those where you get to meet somebody from across the pond who has a great voice to listen to just speaking. So I would encourage you to be back for that episode. And then I'm going to let you know ahead of time, we're going to be off for 3 weeks when I'm traveling again because of Carol's stint in Rhode Island. I'm going to be joining her. And our decision is that we're not doing coffee breaks when I'm in Rhode Island, both from the standpoint of when it would have to be on the air with the time zone difference and just activities and adventures that we're going on during our time there. So we'll remind you of that as we get closer, but there'll be 3 weeks of no coffee breaks. We're looking into the possibility that on some of these dates when we're not on the air live, that we may replay some encore episodes of past episodes. So I may be reaching out to find out if there were past guests or episodes that you thought were pretty cool that we can play again. And then I want to let you know that on Veterans Day, which is November 11th, I'm going to be live from Petaluma, California. If you were with us a few weeks ago when Chris Colenda, and Dee Dee Kiesel were on talking about the Sabre 6 Foundation, we're going to be having another conversation with them about Veterans Day and the importance of honoring and recognizing our veterans. And then they are actually special guests of Petaluma Grand Marshals of the Veterans Day Parade, and they have an event or series of events going on that weekend that I'm going to be there live to participate in. So we're not only going to be broadcasting the show live from Petaluma, I may be doing some additional live streaming around some of their events. A reminder, as we always do, that if there are topics that you're interested in us discussing, guests that you would like to see us bring on the show, you can email me at cbwsteve@comcast.net to share those ideas. That's where things like Kim Baker coming on as a guest co-host came from. Also want to remind you that you can find episodes of Coffee Breaks with Steve on several of the podcast sites as well as on YouTube. And a final reminder that if you haven't already done so, please subscribe on YouTube. It's not always just for what you can see live there, but we're going to be adding some additional things. I mentioned that the conversation with Kristina Mattson, there's going to be an extended version available only on YouTube. And so I would encourage and invite you to tune in there and become a subscriber and like the videos, which will also help us get this in front of more people. I'm not looking to over commercialize Coffee Breaks with Steve, but I think you'll agree with me that there are great topics and great guests that we can share with others. And that's one more reminder before we finish up today, just saying that if you think of somebody, maybe a family member who you think would benefit from hearing the information, knowing about the information that Kristina Mattson shared today. You don't have to live in the state of Washington. Most of this is relevant no matter where you live, and they can follow up within their own state to get the things that they need in place, the documents, and make sure that they're covered. But feel free to refer people, share this with people, refer them to the Coffee Breaks with Steve Facebook page or YouTube page so that they can learn more about this. And I don't care if they decide to follow or subscribe. I just want to make sure that these people, that everybody who needs to hear about these things is hearing about and getting the knowledge and the education that they need. And Carissa, jumping out of an airplane, let's not even get into that. Okay. All right. Listen, as we finish up today, I just want to once again thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being a part of the Coffee Breaks with Steve family. You are all special and important. And I appreciate that you are part of this on a regular basis. If you tuned in for the first time today, or you only tune in occasionally, that's great. If you would like to become a part of the Coffee Breaks family, then yes, subscribe on YouTube, follow us, like us on Facebook so that you are aware of what's coming up and that you can be a part of the conversation on a regular basis. Thank you. As always, I want to let you get on with your weekend, but I want to remind you, as I always do, just a reminder that we all have power. We all have voices. We all have passions, things that we want to see happen. around us and can make a difference. So please do find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.